Hello and welcome to Trad Jazz Today. Dan Zeilinger has been a world-traveling trad jazz musician for the past 40 years. Some of his most memorable performances were on the lawn of the Edinburgh Castle, at the Imperial Palace in Japan, as well as TV shows and commercials around the world. Dan has met many people during his career and has spent many hours on and off stage with these musicians, talking about jazz, life, and more. Some are touring musicians, some are theme park warriors, and some are casual musicians who play on weekends with their friends. They all have stories worthy of a movie script, and through these interviews, Dan will be sharing them with you. Now, Dan Zeilinger.
Hi there, this is Dan Zeilinger with Trad Jazz Today. My guest today is somebody who I've known for a while in one aspect or another. When I first met him, I believe he was tubaing with Bert Barr in the Uptown Lowdown Jazz Band, and he moved on with Hume Street and played in the same band with his wife. And both he and his wife has always been very kind to me over the years, and I was a fan of their talent and musicality. But here he is, Mr. Andrew Hall. Hello, Andy.
Hello, Dan.
So how have you been?
Oh, I'm busy, still working full time, and in spite of the pandemic. And
good that you can work.
Yeah, I guess I would have liked to have the time off, but I'm not quite ready to retire, so I guess I need the income. So it's one or the other.
I understand. I just retired here in March. That doesn't mean I don't need the income, by the way.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. There's nothing magic about retiring that suddenly means you now have all the money you need.
But all of a sudden, you seem to have more jobs to do. I don't know how that works out.
Yeah. I've heard people say they can't imagine how they can get everything done that they have to do after they're retired. And it's just different things to do.
Yeah. We actually moved also. So that meant moving all of my instruments. Now, I don't know if you're as much of a pack hound as I am, but
I am a pack rat. Yeah.
But I've got way too many instruments, and not a very large percentage of them that are working all the time. But
well, let me tell you what an awful pack rat I am. At one point in my life, I owned 2 baritone saxophones and 2 sousaphones.
Okay.
And right now I just picked up a bass saxophone, so now I have 2 of them. And so it's kind of like I tell my wife, well, you never know when you might need a spare.
Works for me.
It's time for me to start unloading things.
Either that or start buying some of the upper end voices. Piccolos don't tend to be that big.
Yeah.
You could probably get 8 or 10 of those for the space that it takes for 2 sousaphones.
Yeah. Well, if I had $10 for every person who ever said to me as I was wrestling a tuba through a door or something, said to me, "Don't you wish you played the piccolo?" You just kind of smile like, yeah, I've heard that 1,000 times.
There are some advantages to having big instruments. I used to have a soft case for my sousaphone, and I'd go into knots and I'd have this big, it was one of those tuxedo bags, and I would wear it on my back like a turtle shell. Yeah. And I'd go walking through the back door at Knott's Berry Farm, and some kid inevitably would say, "What's in the bag, mister?" And so I came up with some creative answers for them. Yeah. One of them was, "It's my sister. She always liked it here." one was, "Isn't it obvious? It's a pizza." Anyway.
It's a pizza.
I digress. Well, let's start at the beginning. Where were you born, Andy?
Well, I was born in a little town in Minnesota called Cloquet. It's about 20 miles from Duluth, which is northeastern Minnesota. Born in 1955. So
virtually Camp Woebegone.
Yeah, it's considering that it doesn't actually. It's like the hidden county that somehow didn't get on the map. But same sort of thing. It's why I talk funny.
I used to love Garrison Keillor's show, because it was really kind of eerie how accurate it was.
Hmm.
you know? I mean,
Well, I love this.
I come from Omaha, Nebraska.
Okay.
So that small town mentality is something you have to live through.
Hmm. Yeah, funny thing about Garrison Keeler is he had just got on the radio with the Minnesota Public Radio when I was in college, and went to college in a little town south of Minneapolis. So I remember hearing him on like the early morning show in would have been the early 1970s, and he just kind of got his start. And he was like a drastic change from the old Minnesota Public Radio, which was very staid and pretty much news and classical music.
Ah,
And so he had this sort of pseudo talk show where he would interview imaginary characters. And I'm sure it was kind of a shock for a lot of people to turn their radio on and hear this going on, because it was not what people expected to hear from Minnesota Public Radio.
he has such a soothing, metered voice.
Yeah.
It's very, talking about having a distinct identity
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to, I love this stuff. But there are things about growing up in the Midwest, like when you say goodbye to guests at your house, but you stand out by the car for 2 hours, say goodbye.
Yeah.
You know, and it's things that are really Midwestern ethics. How many times can you mold Jello? I mean, you know.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It is funny to hear those things and realize how close to the mark, right? Or realize things that you hadn't really picked up on. It's like, yeah, that's how people are, and it just seems normal, so you don't realize at the time. It's nice to have that. It's like a kind of a reflection in a mirror. You see things you didn't ordinarily see.
Yeah, it's pretty darn cool. Now, so what was your very first musical instrument, sir?
Well, I started playing the piano when I was 6, and then when I got into the 5th grade, that's when school band started, and that's when I picked up the trombone. And my only real reason for picking up the trombone was because my father had played the trombone. So I just that was my motivation. I think later on I was more interested in the more complicated instruments. I wanted to learn to play a valve instrument or even woodwind. And but I played trombone through all the way through grade school and into all the way through junior high and high school and college. It's my main instrument.
It's funny. I tell my trombone students when they're first starting out that your instrument has 72 positions, but only one of them's in tune.
Yeah, yeah, and you'd be lucky if you hit one of them. Yeah, I had a cartoon that said, and I think it was a takeoff on a Peanuts cartoon, and it says, "Where's 7th position?" And or 5th position rather, and the other character says, "Only God knows." And yeah, I had the chance to use that in an orchestra rehearsal because we were playing something, and there was a note in the 5th position, and the trombones in unison, and it wasn't very well.
Oh my!
And I used that remark to the orchestra director. He says, "Yes, but it's your job to know where it is." No.
Yeah, what's sad is it's actually very true. 5th position is just a turd.
Yeah, it seems to be harder to find. I guess maybe just from lack of use. I don't know. It always seems to be a little farther out than you think it's going to be.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody about. No, I don't think it was you, about the transition from slide to valves is a lot easier than the other way around.
Yeah, I imagine. I made the transition to valves, and I very quickly learned there is a 1-to-1 correspondence between the positions and the valve combinations. So that made it pretty easy for me to learn to play the baritone horn. And which is, I taught myself to play baritone horn in the 8th grade, and just found one in a back room at the school, because those were the kind of instruments the school always provided. Nobody actually owned their own
Yeah,
baritone
a
horn.
bell front.
Yeah, it was a real nice one. Nice old King, lovely horn. Just 3 valves, but played really well. I would have loved to have that horn. And of course, in those days, nobody I knew had ever heard of a euphonium. They were all baritones to us. At any rate, so that was how I learned to play a valve instrument. I just got a fingering chart and a method book and sat down and started working on it. And then shortly after that, I learned to play tuba, because I figured out it was just a baritone an octave lower. And a little funny little anecdote. We used to have to practice every day, and we had to sign our practice time off. We had a modern school that was just getting into what they called modular scheduling, where you had different time periods of different lengths, and you'd have times when you didn't have anything scheduled, and you're supposed to go study or whatever. Well, I had a friend who was a tuba player. He didn't like to practice. We made an arrangement. I would go in, he would sit in a room and read a book, and I would practice on his tuba.
So the band director heard somebody, huh?
Yeah, well, predictably, what happened is it wasn't too long before I was playing better than he ever played, which isn't saying much. And the band director began to get suspicious, and pretty soon, pretty quickly figured out what was going on. But so that was my means of learning to play the tuba.
And today that boy is a millionaire. No, I'm
There
kidding.
you go. Yeah, what can I say? But anyhow, then a little later on in junior high, I decided maybe down the road I wanted to be a band director. And my junior high band teacher said, well, you probably want to learn to play a woodwind instrument. So I went down to the local music store and picked up a old HN White metal clarinet for about $15. And I probably paid about twice what it was worth. At any rate, and then I learned to play clarinet on that thing. And then I got into high school, and one point somebody wanted to do like a takeoff on a 50s rock band, kind of Sean on Awe type thing. And they had nobody who wanted to play saxophone. So I said, well, here's my chance. So I grabbed a tenor saxophone and learned to play that well enough to get by for a couple of tunes. And, so that's pretty much how I learned to play various instruments.
Did you learn about biting the reed so you could screech up in the higher register?
I never learned to do that. No, it's I don't know any of that. I listened to that guy on Saturday Night Live, and I just can't believe what I'm hearing. And that's a tenor sax, I guess.
Oh yeah.
I don't know who he is, but it's incredible. It sounds like a screech trumpet. But anyhow, and that's amazing. At any rate, and then the other thing, I also was a church organist when I was in high school. I took organ lessons and learned to play from our organist at church. I actually held down a couple church positions over the years.
Now, I don't know if I admitted this to you the last time we spoke, but I actually worked for Organ Exchange.
Oh, really?
I was one of those mall organists who dressed up in the double knit leisure suits and sold lady $1,500 teeny genies. I was one of those guys.
Yeah, with the like the banjo stop or the
Yes, you learn how to play. I can play Mary Ann with 2 fingers.
Well, Art Horgan, the tuba player with Uptown, Lowdown, most recently, he had the same job. He was like a self-taught piano player, and then he told me about that, about selling organs in the mall, and kind of interesting.
The frightening thing was I quit because I was too good at it.
Oh,
as a musician, I couldn't. There was a pilot that was on a layover, commercial pilot, and I actually sold him a $5,100 organ, and that kind of got the better half of my conscience, and I quit playing. I quit selling rather.
Oh, it's happened since then is, you can pick up these electronic organs really cheaply. A lot of times the people just give them away.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the family jokes is that I actually have an electronic organ collection. I have a three manual Rogers church organ.
Oh, my. That's a nice
Came
one.
with like 5 gigantic speakers. It came out of a college in Eastern Washington. And then I picked up another 3 manual that's a theater organ. It's also a Rogers. And I've got about 3 or 4 other ones. Some of them are along the line. I picked up a Hammond, which I really wanted to just turn around and sell and haven't done it.
Is it like a B3 or one of those?
It's not a B3. It's I'm trying to remember the number now. It's a one that has, it's more like a church organ in that it has full-size keyboards.
Okay.
Like H100, I believe. And then it has a 1 octave of reverse colored keys at the left end of the keyboard, which are actually stop selections. Anyhow, Carla West.
Oh, yeah.
She's an organist at a Catholic church in Whitefish. And that was the organ that she had. And we got talking. She said, I really wish I had something other than a Hammond organ for church. So I managed to find her another Rogers 3 manual electronic organ that came out of a cathedral in Bremerton. And I patched it up and brought it and installed it there in their church. And she gave me the Hammond. So that I've still got this darn Hammond sitting in my back room, and I really should just turn around and sell it while it's still worth something. People pay some crazy prices for Hammonds, and I'm not quite sure. And it seems like guitar players like those old Leslie speakers.
Oh, yeah, very much so.
The big upright wooden cabinet.
Right. With a rotating cone.
Yep. Yeah. So, at any rate, yeah, I guess when I get interested in something, I start collecting things. The next
But
thing
you don't have a Wurlitzer.
I do not have a Wurlitzer. I came within a hair's breadth of picking up a actual, honest to God, theater pipe organ with actual pipes. And I'm trying to remember, it was not a Wurlitzer. It was another brand. It's escaping me now, but there was a gentleman who had built actual building behind his house to house the pipe organ. And I know it was about 7 or 8 ranks. It was a fairly good sized organ. And I finally decided at the time I was just too busy because I would have had to take it all apart and move everything. And, the price was really reasonable because the gentleman had passed away and the family just wanted to get rid of it. But I think that's when I finally gave up my dream of having an actual honest to God pipe organ. I came to my senses and said, this is just too much of a chore, too much work for me.
Yeah. My father used to be the superintendent in charge of maintenance and grounds at Loyola Marymount in LA.
Yeah.
And they had a huge pipe organ at the main cathedral,
Wow.
The main church on the grounds. I rambled around inside of one day and took a look at things. Impressive. Those are impressive machines.
Yeah. It's really amazing when you think of even a relatively small pipe organ has a lot of moving parts. And it's kind of surprising that you can keep them working. And it kind of helps to know a little bit about them because I remember coming into play one Sunday and I didn't know that they had been working on the roof over the organ chambers. And what had happened, they dislodged some dirt and some dirt had gotten down in the pipes. And there were some of the pipes that wouldn't make a sound. And I remember having to climb up into the organ chambers and find the pipes that were acting up and clean them out. And it's kind of interesting. It's because what else are you going to do? You can't. You're not going to get somebody to come in and fix it for you on short notice.
I didn't realize it, but a lot of jazz pianists and jazz composers started out as silent movie organists.
No.
And Go ahead.
before they had any sound with the movies, that was a big deal. And a lot of of course, that's where Wurlitzer got their big start. Is for a market, was providing the organs for theaters, and so that was quite a big market for pipe organ companies for a while. It didn't last all that long. I'm not sure how long that theater organ era lasted. Probably not much more than about 10 or 15 years, but it started a little before the 1920s, I would guess, and probably, I don't know, when did the talking movies come out? Was that late 20s?
I believe so. I'm not one of those historian guys.
I'm not good.
I'm lucky if I can remember my own birthday.
There you go. But and then what ended up happening, of course, a lot of those theaters, they still had the organs in place and weren't using them, and a lot of people ended up buying those organs and moving them to other places, or consolidating them into larger instruments, or I've seen some organs built into houses. There was a place, I was a member of the local theater organ society in Seattle. I went to this one guy's house, and he had it in the basement, and there was a giant hole in the floor in the main room of the house with a railing around it, and the sound would come up through this hole in the floor, and the pipe organ was downstairs. I saw another house where they just like filled the garage with it, and then they had an opening from the garage through the wall into the house. So it's kind of interesting. There are I don't know how many, but there's a number of people in the Seattle area that have theater organs built into their houses.
Very strange.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's got to be a huge job. I mean, I finally, like I said, when I had a chance finally to buy one, I really sat down and I thought about the amount of work involved, and just decided I just didn't have enough years left in my life to try and do something like that. So, and on top of that, you can get like computer simulated stuff now for producing.
It sounds pretty good, but it still doesn't shake you to your core.
No, that's true. There's nothing like the real thing.
Yeah, I think I brought it up in the last time I spoke with you that Les Deutsch, I also interviewed. And his dad was actually responsible partly for the Allen Company and those. And
I've talked to Les, and I've also read some stuff he has up on his website. And his father was really one of the founders of what went into electronic organs, and especially getting into like the digital instruments, and played a big part in that. And so it's kind of interesting to meet him and realize, what his background is.
Oh, he has boundless stories on multiple different disciplines. Not only mentioned that he's communications expert for JPL. I mean, the guy's just crazy. He has way too much knowledge for somebody his size. So I say either dumb it down or get heavy. One of the two. So tell me, have you ever slipped into a jazz tune in the middle of a church service?
No, I haven't. I do remember one time playing with Uptown, Lowdown, and when we got to the end of the service for the postlude, we suddenly realized the pipe organ player was playing Fidgety Feet. And he was in the right key and everything, so we all joined in. Of course, it's really appropriate for a postlude, which is what's supposed to kind of drive the people out of the church. But at any rate,
it's amazing. It's actually not quite along the same lines. I was remembering we were down at the Casa de Frutas, that famous fruit stand, which you may not know about. It's on the trail between like LA and Sacramento. There's this gigantic famous fruit stand, and they have a carousel. And so my kids got out of the car and we were buying some figs and stuff, and also I'm listening, and the carousel was playing. I've got a bimbo on the bamboo aisle. Where these tunes pop up, it's pretty funny sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh well. So when let's go back for a minute and talk about your first jazz influences.
Well, I didn't do that much in my earlier years. I mean, my father was a great jazz fan. He had a lot of old 78s, and he used to play those for me when I was growing up. I remember he had an album of Bunk Johnson, like 6 or 8 records. And I learned later in life that he had a couple of Turk Murphy records. I didn't realize that. I knew he had a lot of stuff with Louis Armstrong. And my mother was a fan of swing. She was a big fan of Benny Goodman. She had a lot of 78s of Benny Goodman. And even all the way up to, oh gosh, she had some Stan Kenton stuff, which was
your mom was your mom a Bobby Soxer?
She may have been. I come to think of it, you know, she was, like I said, she was very much into that in high school.
Right, the swing era.
Got all those records, yeah. But it's kind of funny because even she didn't like the Stan Kenton stuff. So I'm sorry to say that. I haven't heard much of Stan Kenton, so I can't really judge myself. But I'm probably biased because my mom didn't like him. I think she was disappointed after buying the records and not liking the music.
Well, yeah, I've listened to a lot of Stan Kenton, and he definitely has his niche, but his approach was more or less trying to bring symphonic sonorities to jazz, and maybe not the best idea sometimes.
Sure. But yeah. And anyhow, so that's mostly where I was exposed to the music, you know, growing up. And in school, I played in a stage band, but it was all very structured. We played the music on the sheet, and we didn't really get a chance to learn how to solo. If there was a solo, it was usually written out. And you know, they never did anything where they just kind of opened it up and let everybody take a solo.
So he wasn't a jazz player, the teacher wasn't?
No, not really. You know, although in junior high school, the teacher was a very good saxophone player. And I think he just kind of left things more structured because there wasn't really time to teach people. And he had to produce a concert, you know, for people to listen to. And I think he was more focused on that. Any rate, then when I graduated from high school, went into college, I was going to college with my plan was to be a band director, a music educator. And after about a year, the first year, I realized I really did not want to be a teacher. And so
what was involved in making that decision?
I decided I didn't have the personality to discipline a large group of unruly kids. I decided they would have just made mincemeat out of me, and I don't think I could have handled it. At any rate, so I went on to other things. I ended up getting weirdly a Bachelor of Art degree in physics. Go figure. But that was I was at a liberal arts college in southern Minnesota called St. Olaf College, and that was about the only thing I saw there left in the curriculum that had much interest to me. At any rate, so that was my kind of my early days. As far as actually getting any real lessons or anything, I took a few trombone lessons from the guy who was the in the local symphony orchestra in Duluth. And of course, I mentioned before I took piano lessons and pipe organ lessons. And then when I got out of college, I was traveling a lot in my job, so I didn't play much music for quite some time.
What was your main job at the time?
I was, well, they called me a field service engineer. I was just really an electronics technician. I worked for a company that made photo typesetting machines.
Okay.
That was like a new technology about that time. And this is before the days when you could go anywhere and get like photocopies made, or go home and sit down at your personal computer and design graphics yourself. In that, at that time, there were still a lot of small print shops all around. Just about any little town even you went to, there would be a print shop. And if you needed anything invitations for a wedding or
Right.
whatever.
Up until that point, the technology for private people would be like a mimeograph.
Yeah, right. And Xerox machines had been invented, but they weren't very common. So if you needed something printed in volume, then you'd go to the print shop, and they would a lot of times do the graphic layout for you, and then they would print the stuff. At any rate, so that was what I was doing. So I was traveling around to a lot of small print shops in the Midwest, repairing equipment or installing equipment. And then what happened is I just got tired of all that traveling. I was probably traveling 1,000 miles a week, and I'd get up and leave the house on Monday and be gone all week, which pretty much means you can't really have any type of social life, much less play in a musical group. Eventually, after a few years of that, then I got a job where I wasn't traveling, and then I started playing music again. And it was like from playing in a local community orchestra, I eventually got hooked up with Rod Byenson, who is a ragtime piano player in central Iowa. And he had a little traditional band called the Skunk River Jazz Band. And started out just playing tuba with him on ragtime gigs. And then it was kind of like on the job training.
Oh yeah.
He just hand me the piano music, and I would find the bass notes and play along with him, and which
Oh,
was
that's some hard playing though.
yeah,
Those ragtime bass lines are nothing to scoff at.
no, no, it was a good training for me. It's a good thing that we weren't in an environment where people were being real particular about the quality of my playing, shall we say. At any rate, so I got a lot of enjoyment out of that. And then what happened is eventually I got a chance to play trombone with his band. And I pretty much learned to play that style of music at that time. I listened to a lot of recordings that Rod provided me with, and there was a band out of Chicago called the Red Rose Ragtime Band, and their trombone player was Tom Bartlett.
Okay.
And so I listened a lot to his playing, both live and on recordings. And then I also listened a lot to recordings of the oh Jesus, it's terrible how my memory is. The two cornet band that Bob Rand played tuba with, South Frisco.
Oh, South Frisco?
Yeah, yeah, and of course their trombone player. Sometimes Tom Bartlett played trombone with them, but there was another gentleman that played trombone with them, whose the name is just escaping me right now, and I'm embarrassed to see him. I could see his bald head, and he played trombone with the Salty Dogs also, as did Tom.
Right.
I just can't think of his name right now. That's terrible. He lived in Chicago also. But I listened to those two guys mainly, and also some Turk Murphy. And like I say, thanks to recordings that Rod provided me with. And so I just pretty much imitated what I was hearing on the recordings, and that's how I learned to play in this style. I think I mentioned to you before that I'm just kind of a primitive player. I don't have a lot of specific training. I just kind of play what I hear.
Well,
And I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. I've had people ask me, how do you do this? And it's like, well, you listen to other people play, and then you get ideas, and that's what you do. I can't tell you any more than that. And
well, as you well know, it the specifics of what, especially a trombone player within a classic jazz ensemble, um, the important thing is to know the role, to know how to lead the chords from one to another, how to play a tailgate slide in the right place. Um,
the other thing is, and I think I've run into a lot of trombone players that don't know this, but I think it really helps to know the melody. And I know there's been times when I've been in jam sessions and maybe there wasn't a lead instrument there. And because I know the melodies to a lot of these tunes, I could play it on the trombone. And I've seen other trombone players look kind of mystified by that. But I think it's important. I think it's important to know the chords. But to me, it's all bundled in the melody.
Yeah.
So it's helpful to know all that.
Well,
I just thought of that other trombone player's name, Jim Snyder.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm in the same boat with you, sir.
Yeah.
I was thinking.
I couldn't think of his name. It's embarrassing because he was a wonderful player, and I really enjoyed hearing him.
Speaking of trombone players, I know plenty of trombone players who have incredible chops and brilliant technique, and it really hurts their Dixie playing. It really hurts your classic jazz playing, because that's not the role. I guess the famous quote of Turk: "If tuba players got too busy, evidently he would say, if I wanted a clarinet player, I'd hire one."
I heard a quote one time. It said the best bass players are the guys that are old and tired, and they don't play any more notes than they have to. and that is a danger, as you get where your technical skills get better and you can hear things and play things. There's a tendency to do it.
Yeah, I was guilty. In fact, as I've gotten older, I've gotten simpler. Both mentally and musically. No.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah. And maybe you don't realize it at first, especially as you're younger, you're excited about your playing, and there's a tendency to go overboard.
Well, I'm sure you remember the days when I was playing all the time. I spent way too much time in the upper register for a tuba player. And I listen to old recordings of myself, and I'm impressed with my own skill, but not necessarily with my musicality from those days.
Yeah, I know. I'll tell you the truth. I've never made a recording I can stand listening to, and it's just one of those things. It's like standing 3 inches away from the mirror, and you hear everything that you don't like, all the things that you wonder, what was I thinking of, and so.
Fortunately, the rest of the world usually don't hear what we hear.
That's true. Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. But I always wish that I had, every time I hear a recording, it's always like, I wish I had done better. It's just how it goes. But anyhow, moving on, I played with Rod, and then what happened is Rod eventually got invited to play at the Helena Jazz Festival, and we went out there. I think some of the people couldn't come. We had a rough time. We had to pull in a cornet player at the last second because our cornet player backed out. So we ended up getting Mike Beeson from Chicago, and he filled in like on a moment's notice, which was no big deal for him. But it was tough for the rest of us. Because we're just a little local band, and we weren't used to doing things. We were used to having the same people all the time. And at any rate, and that's when I first heard Bert Barr's band. Went back a year later, it was just Rod and me as a ragtime duo, with me playing tuba, him playing piano. And at that time, Uptown Lowdown's tuba player had passed away, Sal Smith. I don't know if you knew Sal. The recording they made, Hauling Ash.
Yes.
Ever heard that one? And with the picture of Mount St. Helens on the front. Sal, I think that's the last recording Sal played on. Any rate, and I ended up at that festival, I ended up playing every single set. I played alternating between Rod's ragtime and I ended up playing with Uptown Lowdown on every set. And in those days, I guess playing like 8 sets a day. I don't know how I could manage it now. Even on tuba, I'm surprised I wasn't a bloody mess by the time the thing was done. And then that's when Bert hired me. And at the time, I was living in Orange County. I was living down in Bellflower. And I moved up to Seattle and played with Bert for about a year before I got married. And then when I got married, I decided, well, I wasn't doing very well money-wise playing music. So I went back to being an electrical engineer. And then I joined the band that my wife was playing in, which was the Hume Street Jazz Band, which was out of Aberdeen, and played with them. I played piano of all things with them. I'm never not much of a piano player, but it's kind of like I was married to the banjo player, so I had an in. And they did need a piano player at that time. So I played with them, and then what ended up happening is Bert, he had a 2-cornet band at that time, and Ed Krenz, the second cornet player, retired.
Right.
Bert asked me to come in and play second cornet, which I did. And then what ended up happening was then the trombone player retired. The name would come to me later. I'll call you at 2 a.m. when I think of it. And,
no, it's okay.
So then I switched over to trombone with them, and so that's pretty much a synopsis of my career. And eventually,
did Bert know that you had started as a trombone player?
I think he did, yeah, because I did some trombone gigs with him when I was playing tuba with him, and for a while I was like dragging the trombone with me from set to set, because occasionally we do something with 2 trombones. It seemed like it got to the point where I'm tired of hauling the tuba and the trombone and not playing the trombone. And if anytime I left the trombone in the car would be when Bert would go, well, let's do a 2 trombone number now. And it's, sorry, Bert, the trombone's out in the car. But at any rate, yeah, he knew I played trombone.
Well, one thing about playing with Bert's band is you always had to play a lot of John Philip Sousa marches.
Yeah, so. Right. Yeah, or other varieties of marches. He and part of that was Ed Krenz's doing, because Ed was a music educator from way back, and so he had an interest in marches, and he did some arrangements for the band. So that's where some of that stuff came from.
Well, I was thinking more of the marching band group stuff we used to do up in I guess up in the Sun Valley, I think was one.
Right, and there was another festival where they would do that as well. I can't remember which one it was, but I used to just love that, because when I was in high school, it wasn't cool to play marches in band, and so as a result, if we played one march every year with the band, that would be about it. So there's lots of these great old marches I had never played. And so between those Sousa march sets that we used to do, and then later when I joined the concert band with the local Elks Club, I finally got a chance to play some of this great stuff, which I never played. And I think I'd maybe played like 2 Sousa marches in my whole life before that.
Oh, it's great stuff.
Like Stars and Stripes, and I think we did the Minnesota March, which is a kind of a it's just, it has the word Minnesota in it, so of course we had to play it. So I used to really love that, and one of the fun things for me was I could show up like with my baritone horn, and as far as I'm concerned, that's the best part in the whole band. Is
Yeah.
baritone.
Oh, it is very much so. You get all those neat counterpoints.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got to relay this story to you since we're talking about this. I was up at Sun Valley, and we had George Probert with us,
Oh God.
and he shows up to one of these March afternoons or whatever it was, and he shows up with this. Were you there? He showed up with the sopranino.
Yes, I may have been there that one because I seem to recall there was an issue. The folks from the Charles Daniels,
right, the Jack Daniels band,
or the Jack Daniels back band were there, and I think at one point one of the musicians turned around and said, "This is written music. You're not supposed to be improvised."
They had two really attractive alto horn players, and George was standing right behind them. I was there. I was watching this, and we got done with the first piece, and they said something to George, picked up their stands, and moved to the other side of the band.
I'm thinking that that could have been sort of a painful experience, because I'm sure being right in front of him, he didn't play softly.
Well, I talked to George after that set, and I said, I understand they put a hit out on your sopranino, and he never brought that instrument to another gig.
Oh, really? Oh, that's too bad.
Yeah, I didn't mean it to be hurtful. Right. I thought it was funny.
Yeah, right.
Well, for peace sake, Danny, I was just playing a part, Anyway.
I never really knew George. I saw him a few times, but I never actually met him.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful personality. And eventually got to be a good friend. I was so privileged. But yeah, it was my fondest memory of having Bert stand in front of that group as George was tearing up the sheets with his sopranino.
I think the last time I played that, I ended up being the only tuba player.
Oh my!
Yeah, unfortunately, I had my big old 20K sousaphone, and I'm just blowing my brains out trying to provide a bass line for about 60 other people, and yeah,
it's always interesting because I would say that maybe 40% or maybe even more of those people aren't readers necessarily.
Well, that's what's been hard for me. Until actually recently, I didn't do much reading. One of the reasons I started playing or really enjoyed playing the traditional jazz is I found I could enjoy playing a lot more without the encumbrance of trying to read music. And then recently I've started playing a lot with the local music groups. I play in the symphony, I play in the concert band, and I play with the pit orchestra for the musicals up at the local college. And as a result, my reading has improved. I'm still not a great reader, but it's still hard for me to play musically when I'm reading a piece of music.
You must run across Dan Marcus. You must run across Dan Marcus a lot.
I used to. I haven't seen him in years, but I know he did a lot of kind of pit orchestra stuff.
Right. That's why I said that.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm certainly not in his league. So it's one of those deals. This is just a community group, and they'll pull together the people they need for, and they do surprisingly well considering we're kind of a backwater. We're not at the edge of the earth, but you can see it from here. That sort of thing. There's like one road in and out, that sort of thing. And but there's actually quite a bit of music going on in Aberdeen. It's surprising.
Yeah, I've been to the Aberdeen Festival a couple of times. It's a lovely community.
Yeah. It's sad that festival isn't still going on, but it's one of those things. It existed for quite a few years. I wish I could remember how many years it was. What really killed that festival, I think, was the fact that they had it in February And we had, I think, 2 years in a row where it snowed. And I think the first year was the year they brought the Royal Society Orchestra up. And then it snowed. And of course, as we put it, the crowd stayed away in droves. And so that was took a real financial hit. And then I think the next year it snowed again. And so February was a kind of a risky time to schedule something because that is, we get more snow up here than you might expect.
I'm sorry. I've got a car alarm going off outside of my door.
Oh. Huh.
And I'm just being distracted.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I know that Aberdeen's pretty mild as far as Washington temperatures and sensibilities are concerned. It's actually pretty out there on the West Coast. It's a lot milder in some cities in Washington.
Well, it was a big surprise for me when I moved from Orange County. I was just chasing a job, and I looked at the map, and I pretty much drew a line straight from Seattle to Duluth, and because they're at about the same latitude. And my thought was, well, I've lived in that cold, snowy environment before. I can do it again. And was very surprised at how mild the weather is. And of course, what it all comes down to is the fact that we're right on the ocean, and that really moderates the temperatures. So even though we're just as far north as Duluth, farther north than Omaha, the weather is completely different.
Yeah.
Of course, as soon as you get over the mountains into eastern Washington, then you get into a lot colder weather and snow.
Yes, you get to igloos. No.
Igloos. At any rate, I've enjoyed living in this area, and that's why I'm still here. And the rain is not that big a deal. I tell people, I've never got my car stuck in the rain. I've never had to shovel the rain out of my driveway so I could get to work. So given the choice of mild weather and rain and really cold weather and freezing weather and snow, was an easy decision. And I have actually walked to school when it was 20 below zero. Now, it wasn't uphill both ways. But
not like our parents. Yes.
No, not like our parents. But they built a new school when I was going to high school, and it was like 2 miles from my house. And I had the option. I could walk like 3/4 of a mile and wait to get on a bus and ride to school, or I could just walk to school. So I used to just walk, and I never owned a car in high school. So, I've walked that plenty of times, carrying a trombone, mind you. So switching hands about every 1/4 mile so my fingers didn't fall off.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
No, in this neck of the woods, the hard part is walking to school when it's 107 out. That's a different thing.
Yeah.
But,
well, the bad thing about Minnesota is you get some high temperatures in the summer, not really necessarily that hot, although I've seen it over 100 degrees, but maybe just for very brief periods of time. We usually get a spell of like hot and humid weather, where it's in the 90s and the humidity is almost 100%. And that is what I probably find more miserable than anything.
yeah.
It's kind of funny you get those extremes. Whereas here in Western Washington, it really doesn't get that hot. It doesn't get that cold. So the temperature range is a lot smaller.
Yeah. Well, who knows? My wife has been making noises about wanting to move up into your area.
Oh.
So I don't know if it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But,
well, it isn't cheap to live up here, but I imagine it's not cheap to live down. Now, you live in the Los Angeles area?
I live in Anaheim.
Oh, okay.
I can hear the fireworks when they go off at the park.
Yeah. That's cool.
Maybe for the first 2 years. And anyway, well, thank you so much for doing this interview again.
Sure.
Full disclosure to our audience, we actually recorded this a week ago, and well, I should say we didn't record this a week ago.
We
I-
didn't
I-
record it, yeah.
I'd asked Andrew for an interview then, and I made a typical Zeilinger mistake. And this is our second round, and thank you very much, sir.
Well, thank you. I'm pleased to have a chance to do it. Thanks for your interest.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And I hope we get to, I hope I get to see you on stage soon sometime.
Yeah, me too. I'd like to get playing again. I'm getting so I miss it so much. I'm almost ready to do some of these home recordings.
I've done a bunch, so.
Yeah, I've been doing some for the local community orchestra and band, so I'm getting a little more used to it. So,
Still not the same.
Yeah.
All right, so you take care of yourself then.
All right. Nice
Bye-bye
to
now.
see you. Bye now.
Thank you for watching Trad Jazz Today. Dan posts new interviews every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Make sure to check out the archive of past shows, and please give us a thumbs up when you subscribe to the channel. Bye.